Welcome back to Rink Rap, presented by Forever Blueshirts. I am Jim Cerny, joined by former New York Ranger defenseman Randy Moller, who, of course, is also one of the great voices of the Florida Panthers, the defending Stanley Cup champions and the team that KO'd the Rangers in last year's really great Eastern Conference final. Randy, I know you're super busy packing for a huge trip coming up, but thanks for a few minutes.
Oh, not a problem. I look forward to this. Talking about Rangers and the old Ranger days, and of course the rivalry. We got this pretty good rivalry now that is built up between the Panthers and the New York Rangers. Of course, Vinny Trocheck used to play for the Panthers. Let's just say there's no love lost in this rivalry. That's for sure. Two very similar teams, Jim. A lot of skill, great goaltending, special teams, and that. So they match up pretty well.
Yeah, I'm curious right now. I think Ranger fans they're so hyped about the start. 5-0-1. They're averaging more than 5 goals a game. Igor's playing out of his mind. Everything that could go well has gone well for the Rangers so far. And they kind of get that look about them. It's an intangible about, hey, unfinished business here from last year. So take us back 12 months ago to when the Panthers, after losing in the final to Vegas, kind of what their approach was last year. And when did you sense that these guys they're really lasered in on this here? This could be a special season.
Oh, first day of training camp. Alexander Barkov and Matthew Tkachuk. I mean, they basically came out a year ago in training camp and said anything less than winning the Stanley Cup will be a total failure. And I think that was the mindset of this hockey club and the coaching staff. Once you get a taste of it, and the Panthers, remember a couple years ago, that miraculous run where they beat Boston in Game 7 and went on and got to the finals. But unfortunately, and there's a lot of aspects to winning the Stanley Cup. You ask any of these guys, ask Mark Messier, and there's one Wayne Gretzky, all these guys that have won multiple Stanley Cups, a lot of things have to fall into place. And for the Panthers, they got to the finals but when they got to the finals, they were so beat up. Tkachuk was hurt, playing with a broken sternum. Aaron Ekblad had a shoulder injury. Brandon Montour had a separated shoulder that he was playing with. Down the list. It happens. Injuries happen in that. But they faced a Vegas team that was totally healthy, and they were a machine, and they deservedly so. They won the Stanley Cup. So there's a little bitterness left in your mouth. You ask the players after that series, after the season was over, and that. So that motivation coming to training camp, they knew that they had a team that could go all the way, and if things fell into place and God help them that they stay relatively healthy with their core players, that they've got a legitimate chance. And that's what happened. They were able to stay relatively healthy and all the way through. And it was a dream come true. I'm the longest tenured Florida Panther. I've been here for 30 years now. And I've been through a lot of downs, more than ups. We've had some lean years down here with this franchise, but really saw when the Viola family and his partner Doug Sifu took over, what was that, 11 years ago now? It's hard to believe how they just built this thing up off the ice and on the ice and took their time and did it right, got in the key people, all these high draft picks from being one of those bottom feeder teams like the Ekblads and the Huberdeaus and the Barkovs and that, to build the team back up again and to see it come and to see South Florida celebrate the Stanley Cup was really amazing. It was, I mean, I don't know if you can compare it to when the Rangers won it in '94 and that, but it was a long time coming, and we had a lot of fans down here that have been suffering a long time, including me. And I'd seen it all and that, but that's what made it, Jim. That's what made it so sweet. It wasn't that this was a team that just started or whatever, has had lots of success year by year by year and that, and like myself just coming in 2 years ago and then winning the President's Trophy, going to the finals and all that. No, there's been a lot of hard work and a lot of heartache. And so it made it that much more gratifying for not only myself but everybody down here. And the celebration, you're like they say, once you win the Masters, you're always a Masters champion. And when you win the Stanley Cup, it's like the same thing.
Yeah. Uh, at the end of that Eastern Conference final last year, uh, there was so much talk about, boy, the Rangers got to figure out how to beat Florida. It seems like their style of play, and which is that, certainly the great offense, rely on Igor. That was good enough against pretty much everybody else. But boy, when push came to shove in that Eastern Conference final, there was no doubt that Florida was the more rugged team. They wore down the Rangers. They were relentless with their puck pursuit and puck possession. Really, the difference in that series. And so people said, well, to beat the Panthers, you got to be the Panthers. And the Rangers really haven't done that in the offseason and putting their team together this year. They did add Riley Smith. I know Sam Carrick's now on the fourth line, a little more ruggedness, but really it's the same kind of team. So can you talk about, just from the outside, kind of that mindset of, oh, wait a minute, the Rangers have to out-Panther the Panthers here, but yet they didn't really change that mix as much as I think a lot of people thought they may have.
Well, I thought it was an interesting quote right at the start of this season. It was like game 2 or game 3. We're talking with the head coach, Paul Maurice. And I was talking to him about the defensive pair of Dmitry Kulikov and Nico Mikkola, who Mikkola obviously had a short stint with the Rangers, because they had a great training camp, and what they experienced and the confidence that they gained last year all the way through the season. They both played every game, and the importance that they were in through the playoffs and especially in the finals. So I was doing on TV, I was doing a special kind of, focusing in on Kulikov and Mikkola. And Paul Maurice, he just folded his arms like this and looked at me and said, Randy, we don't win the Stanley Cup without those two guys. You can
Yeah.
talk about Kachuk, Barkov, Verhaeghe, Reinhardt, Sergei Bobrovsky. We don't win the Stanley Cup without those two pillars back on defense.
Hmm.
So the reason I say that is the role players that play a significant role, and the Rangers, they have to figure that out. They have more than enough talent, high end offensive talent. On the back end, they can carry the puck up the ice and that. But it's those intangibles when it gets tough, and in the playoffs when it takes more than skill. Ask the Boston Bruins about that. Panera, or excuse me, Pasternak and Marchand and that. But when it comes down to winning the battles in the corners and sacrificing to get the puck in deep, I know there's a lot of cliches in that. That's what wins hockey games late in the season, in the playoffs, and that's what wins you the Stanley Cup. I'm sure that Mark Messier, he has, and Wayne Gretzky and that. They talk about when they won those Stanley Cups and that those role players that came in, the fourth line guys that had the big shifts and win a key face off in their own zone, and that's what it takes. And so it took the Panthers. Let me go back. A few years ago now. Remember when the Panthers won the President's Cup?
Of course.
And they hadn't won a series since the Carter administration in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Okay. They beat the Washington Capitals, and everybody down here in South Florida, everybody was partying like we'd won the Stanley Cup. We finally broke the egg and won a series. Riding high, Carter Verhaeghe, if you remember, with
Oh,
series
yeah.
winning goal and the whole bit. Okay, we're ready to go now, and we faced the Tampa Bay Lightning. Poof, right in the nose, and we just went, and that was the end of it. And there was heartache, but everybody had a chance, and Paul Maurice talked about it, and Bill Zito, the general manager, talked about it. Okay, we know we have a great team, we know we have great offense, goaltending, da 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 da. What are the intangibles that it's going to take? And it's that grittiness. It's the depth players, the four lines, the six defense. Like Paul Maurice, he would talk about it. I have confidence they can throw any line out against any of our lines. I am confident with it. I don't stand in the back of the bench and go, oh no, I've got my fourth line out there against their first line, and oh, we're gonna no. If you have a team that has that identity, and that's where a lot of high level teams, Jim, have to figure out and have to acquire in order to get the Nick Cousins, the Ryan Lombergs, the Kevin Stenlunds, the Kyle Opozos. I mean, go back last year and watch through the playoffs. These guys had
Yeah.
amazing impact in what the Panthers were able to do.
Yeah, well, that said, how much do the Panthers miss them so far here in the
Oh
early
yeah.
going? That
No, they
was
do. And
significant losses.
yeah, no, they do. They do. And the players that they brought in and that have fit in. And that, but time will tell. Time will tell when you get down to the nitty gritty, and
Yeah,
the series is tied at 3, whether it's the first series or the fourth series, whether these players can come through and give you the games that you need, and the performances that you need in the limited ice time that they're going to get. That's usually the difference, Jim.
yeah. It's interesting in revisiting that Eastern Conference final and talking about all the intangible things that you're talking about here. Um, from your point of view, longtime NHL defenseman, obviously have continued on for decades as a broadcaster as well. So you're so in tune to the game. When you look at Artemi Panarin or Mika Zibanejad, using those two guys as examples from that series last year, what did you see? Didn't you see? What would make you feel good if you're on the Rangers side, obviously about having them all their super talent, but is there a concern there? Are they guys that can take it to that next level and maybe get a little bit more grit to their game? Or is that just not their style and you got to build up around them, with players that will fill those roles and, provide a little bit of more of that grit and get to it in the as the playoffs move on.
Well, I think it's a combination, but no doubt, and I have the utmost respect. I mean, the talent of Panarin and Zibanejad and Kreider and these guys, there's no doubt. I think because they're intelligent players, really intelligent players, they have to figure out though that when you get into the playoffs and how deep you get in the playoffs, those pretty little plays, whether it's on the power play or the 5-on-5 or on the rush, a lot of times it's not going to happen. So, how do you handle that? How do you accept that? Do you make the changes or change your mindset that, you know what, those pretty goals that we scored in January on a Tuesday night in San Jose, it's not gonna work. It's not gonna work. And it's up to the players to accept that, to challenge themselves. And I really do believe that what the Rangers went through last year with their top end talent, that they realize that, yes, we've been through it. Just like the Panthers went through what I just told that
Right.
short story about the Tampa Bay Lightning. They got punched in the nose and they didn't have a response for it. And that, so you've got to go through it. It's like anything. The every sweet moment in our lives, I think, what brings you to that sweetness is you've been through that adversity. You've been down the road where, oh, I wish we could have done this and could have done that differently or whatever. It's how you approach the game. But no doubt, like when I started to answer this question, you need a combination as well. You've got to have those
Yeah.
gritty players that are going to be able to supply a little bit of sandpaper and as well. But I mean, I have, you saw last year in the playoffs, every series they were going after Barkov, they were going after Verhaeghe, Reinhart. They were going after these guys and trying to get them off their game and that kind of stuff. And the mental fortitude, that's where it comes in. And ask the Vegas Golden Knights and the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Washington Capitals when they won a number of years ago. There's a great example. I mean, it wasn't just OV when the Washington Capitals won. I mean, they had a
Yeah.
heavy, solid team that would play the right way. Yeah, I know it's a cliche, Jim, but it's called playoff hockey. It's so much different than the regular season.
Yeah.
Oh, it is
Yeah.
so much different. You're battling for every inch, every shift, every face-off, every aspect of the game becomes such a focal point, and that you have to be mentally prepared and accept it, that it's going to be a struggle, and it's not going to go right all the time. You look at the Panthers. I mean, they were down against the Rangers in that series,
Yep.
and they could have
Yep.
folded up like a tent and said, "Oh, you know what? This maybe isn't our year again," and but no, they dug in, and they got some extraordinary performances from some players that you didn't really think of, and then that allows your star players to be put in a position of success in order to come through. You need superstars, and the Rangers are full of stars. They have more than enough talent. Their goaltending is lights out. Shesterkin is he's out of his mind. I've watched a couple of games already this year and
Yeah.
that. So you don't have to worry about that. It's just making sure that the team concept comes in and everybody is pulling the rope the same way.
Yeah. It's interesting. Every time, I have a conversation with a hockey person about, failing and then succeeding in the Stanley Cup playoffs. I go back to when I was just a kid breaking into the business. Your former teammate, Mark Messier with the Rangers. I remember him at the end of the 92 playoffs when the Rangers were ahead of Pittsburgh in the second round, ended up
Yeah.
losing. And he said, he looked at all of us group of reporters and he said, my experience is you lose, and then you learn to win. He goes, almost always you have to lose first. And then he went back to his days with Edmonton and how, they thought they were going to take out this older Islander team and everything in the final, and not the case. But how much you learn and what you take from that losing. And I remember in 94, the night they won the cup, he was looking at us again. He said, what did I tell you a couple of years ago? You got to lose first, go through that adversity, dig down deep, and then you learn how to win.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
I
No.
think the Panthers are a great example of that.
Yeah. No. No doubt. No doubt. Yeah. They realize, they think what it takes, and then it's up to your leadership group and that. And I have to mention too, with Paul Maurice, this is a coach that is not afraid to make changes. And the Panthers, so many times, even last year during the playoffs, all of a sudden Verhaeghe's not going or something,
Yeah.
and he'll flip flop Verhaeghe and Reinhart, or Rodriguez goes up and Verhaeghe goes down, and that kind of stuff. You can't just be pig-headed where you're just saying, nope, these are our four lines and I'm not
Yeah.
making changes, whatever. He would make changes. And a lot of times everybody would go, ooh, what's he doing here? But more times than not, he pushed the right button. Now, he didn't stay with those changes very
Right.
often, but sometimes it's necessary. And that takes a lot of fortitude. That takes your ego. Sometimes will take a little bit of a bruise in the sense, but you have to realize where you're at, and what you need to do in order to achieve the success that you need. And you can go down to the minute details of a forecheck, or something that's not working or whatever. Okay, well then let's make some changes here. And the Panthers were able to, especially on their fourth line, they would insert, I mean, Kyle Opozo, and then it would
Yeah.
be Nick Cousins, and then
Yeah.
Lombard would come in, and then, I mean, it was one thing after. Lawrence was
Lawrence.
a
Yeah.
part-time player as well. But boy, you look back and they all had impacts of it. But it really takes a team. It really does. And a lot of fans like, oh yeah, team this, team that. But it does. It takes an army in order to win, and then you have to have the good fortune, the good luck is staying away from the injury bug as well, especially to your key players. It all has to come together. But I tell you what, once you get on that wave, and you could see it, and especially when the Panthers, when they got out to that 3-0 lead against Edmonton
Yeah.
in the finals, I mean, I was thinking, oh, who would have thought that the Panthers going to win 4 straight against Connor McDavid and that? Well, all of a sudden
Wow.
they come back and McDavid and Draisaitl and that, and all of a sudden, whoop, 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 and the series is tied at 3, and it comes back. But you look at that game number 4, or excuse me, game number 7, and Panthers. All the national media and everybody, oh, it's going to be the biggest choke job or whatever. You talk to the players, and I was there. Talk to the players, morning skate, Paul Maurice. They were focused, confident. There was no nervousness in them. It's a process. Sergei Bobrovsky, it's a process. It's a process. And that end, they went out and just played one of the best games ever and completely shut down the
Yeah.
Oilers and went to win game 7.
Yeah. A quick thought from you. I know you're packing up now. You got a long trip ahead of you that starts at the Garden on Thursday. You know, that's a big one. You know, the Rangers, when the schedule came out, they circle, oh, good. We got these guys in early October. And Rangers right now, playing terrific hockey as well. We know it's a big game for them. But for Florida, what does this game mean? And what do you expect to see on Thursday?
Well, I'll wrap that question in around the whole big question that the players, and especially Paul Maurice, the head coach, was asked, early in the season. You're in late October, you're playing a Tuesday night in Columbus, whatever. How do you motivate your team? How do you, and that, and I don't think there's a real clear-cut answer, Jim. I mean, these are proud athletes, but I can tell you, and I keep going back to Messier and Gretzky, of course, two of the greatest ever to play the game. Once you get a taste of winning that Stanley Cup, it's amazing to me that these guys, they want to get back again. It's like a drug. It really is a drug. So, uh, for the Panthers playing the New York Rangers in October, I think they realize that you can't just turn on and turn off the switch. You have to be able to play. I think the Panthers realize that every team, there's 31 other teams that have all had on their calendar, on their schedule, oh, we're playing the Stanley Cup champions, and they've
Right.
circled that date. So teams are getting up for them. We saw it in Ottawa. We saw it in Buffalo earlier in the season. Teams are just coming out flying because they know that if they don't, they could get embarrassed. And so the Panthers, they accept that. They're going to have their ups and downs, and that they're still missing. Obviously, Alexander Barkov is still on the sidelines for
Yeah.
hopefully the next few days or whatever, and then they go over to Finland, and they want to make sure that he's going to be healthy enough to play over in Finland. So it'll be a good test. The Rangers will be ready. The Rangers have a great team. I love the way they play, and they're on the puck all the time, and the great skill, and of course their power play and goaltending uh, makes them rise above a lot of other teams in the NHL.
Is it I know you spent what two and a half seasons, with the Rangers, and kind of right when the organization was taking a turn. Neil Smith had come in as GM. Some of those big moves started to take place. You were there when Mark Messier was acquired, when Adam Graves came in. Of course,
Yeah.
Leach and Richter were, emerging as young stars. So you were there at a real pivotal moment in franchise history. Just kind of wondering what emotions, what feelings you have every time you return to the Garden.
Well, yeah, and when I arrived to the Rangers from that trade from Quebec, Neil Smith, that was his first trade, and it was the end of training camp, and I got traded for Michel Petit and that. But yeah, you're right, Jim. They were early in a transition. My first defense partner was Ron Greschner.
Oh,
And that, we had Norman Rocheford was
yeah.
there, who was a teammate of mine in Quebec, but he was, they had terrible knee
Knee
injuries
injuries.
and
Yeah.
that, Dave Shaw was there, Mark Hardy, of course, James Patrick, and that. I'm talking about the defense and that. But there was
Yeah.
a lot of transition. I mean, you had, Samuelson was there and Jan Eriksson and that. Within my time with the Rangers, there was a huge turnover from when I first got there. Bernie Nichols came in, and
True.
and that
Yep.
and that huge trade and that it was and then of course the Messier trade that really galvanized and changed the direction of the Rangers to help them win that Stanley Cup. I love my time in New York. I love playing for the New York Rangers. I got great memories. Unfortunately, my kids were very small at the time. I had three kids that were under the age of 5 at the time, so it was safe to say that I wasn't at Studio 54 three times a week. But no, but it was a great time. Roger Nielsen was the coach,
Yeah.
uh, and that. But I really enjoyed my time with the Rangers and that. But like I tell the story when I got traded from Quebec to the Rangers. Quebec moved to Colorado and won the Stanley Cup. I get traded from the Rangers to Buffalo. They win the Stanley Cup the next year. I retire from the Panthers. At the end of my career, that year they go to the Stanley Cup Finals against Colorado. You see the trend in all that. You see there seems to be a trend. So yeah, I only played 16 games actually for the Florida Panthers at the
Yeah.
end of my career. I tell
Yeah.
people, Jim, that I was a stay-at-home defenseman, and until they told me that I needed to stay at home.
Yeah, I knew that that's where that was going. The setup was too obvious to put that one away.
I tell people when I played 7 years in Quebec, it took me 7 years to ruin that franchise and that yeah. So no, but great memories, Jim, of the Rangers. What a classy organization. Neil Smith was the general manager there and treated me very, very well, and all my teammates that I was able to play with. It was quite an experience.
Yeah, yeah, quick final one for you. And again, I know you got to pack, you got to run, you got to flight and everything. Just we talked so much. Mark Messier's name kept coming up in this conversation,
Yeah.
and of course, you were there. The day he arrived, and you were there for most of his first season. He ended up winning the Hart Trophy that year. Um, Give me a Messier story, something that just stood out to you about being a
Oh,
teammate
I
of
got
his,
it.
being a
I
brother
got
of
I
his.
got a dandy one. I got a dandy one. So Messi gets traded to the Rangers. We're playing at home that day. He got traded the night before, and so he
Right.
comes in. And if you can remember the old Ranger locker room, in the middle of the locker room, there was this huge, great big wooden thing that they had the Gatorade on and all the laces and the tape
Yeah.
and everything like that. So when I came in for the game that night at about 4:30 or whatever, I walked into the Rangers locker room and this thing is gone. And I look over and I hear the story, babe. Joe Murphy, who was the trainer, longtime trainer, equipment trainer for the New York Rangers. I said, babe, what's going on? He goes, right inside the door. That's where Messier wanted his locker. So that's his locker. And he told us, he said, this table thing, I want it gone. And they said, what? It's fastened to the floor. It's like with cement and everything like that. No, I want it gone because I want to look down to the far side of the dressing room, locker room, and I want to be able to look into the eyes of my defensemen because all of us defense, remember, we were in that back
Yeah.
corner, right?
Absolutely.
And it blocked the vision. So boop, the thing was gone that afternoon. The tape thing and all the Gatorade, whatever. There was a big hole where the carpet was and everything. It was gone. There's the Mark Messier story for you and the impact that he made
Yeah.
um, with the New York Rangers. And that's what winners do. That's what leaders do. And well, we know the outcome of it. That's for sure.
Accountability. That's what it was all about with
Oh
Mark. He
yeah,
wanted to look
absolutely.
everybody in the eye that
Yeah.
between
Yeah.
periods, before games. Yeah, I've
Well, and
heard
then one
different.
more, one more as well that he brought from Edmonton, and that I carried it on after when I went to Buffalo, and then on to Florida as well. We every time there's a road trip, and we fly into a city and land and get to the hotel, 5:30, whatever, and that. I remember Messier always saying, "Team meeting, boys, team meeting," and what the team meeting meant was somebody would pick an establishment, and you could come for one. You could come for one. You could come and have even a soda, but you come for one, or you come for a handful or whatever. But everybody shows up, and
Yeah.
then everybody gets together, even if it's only for one beer or one soda, whatever you're having or whatever. And then you can go on and, in groups and go to dinner and that kind of stuff. But everybody shows up. And I think that's something that we can all um, understand and accept, that it's all about the team, and the team gets together, and that. I remember with the Rangers, and we would fly into Calgary or Edmonton. I'm from Red Deer, right in between, and I got family, and my mother's got her hair done, and my father's washed the car, and they're all waiting and at the hotel, and I'd come in, and they'd be standing in the lobby of the hotel, Jim, and I go, just hold on for a half an hour, because I'm going across the street, because the team is we're having a team meeting. I'm going to have my one, and then I'll meet you wherever for dinner. But we always went for one.
That is great. That's a great story. And that's Mark. That is so Mark.
Yeah.
Randy Moller, really appreciate your time today. This was a lot of fun. I could keep going on, but as I've said a couple of times, you're getting ready for a road trip. It starts tomorrow at the Garden. You guys are going to fly out to the Garden tomorrow. Then you got the Islanders, you got the Sabres, then you're off to Finland. So you're going to be away from home for a little bit. Big road trip for the Panthers. And I know the Ranger fans are fired up for Thursday night. So should be a lot of fun. Really appreciate your time today, and best of luck the rest of the season.
Well, thanks, Jim, for having me on. And we'll do this again very, very soon.